Okay, hi everyone. Hi, I'm really glad to see you all, especially after this fulfilling lunch. So glad that so many people managed to be here to listen to my talk. And just like you, I used to be an attendee at this conference, and this is the first time I'm giving a talk and I have a chance to speak from the stage. I mean, at React Alicante. Thank you. Yeah, my name is Nastya. Anastasia is the full form, but friends call me Nastya, and I'm a senior front-end engineer at Booking.com. Daily, I support internal TypeScript ecosystem, and I try to improve infrastructure we ship to our customers who are developers. Now, when you know a little bit about me, let me engage you in a quick exercise. So imagine you wake up in the morning and you have a nice cup of coffee and you push to remote some of the code you've written yesterday's night, only to figure out in 30 minutes that your pipeline is broken. All the time you spent in working on this app, the anticipation, the context switching, and yet frustration arrives from your precious end-to-end testing job. So if you do relate to this story, buckle up. What if I tell you that by the end of this talk, you will know how to make your testing strategy more efficient and your work more pleasant? And if you don't relate, it's okay. Feel free to bask in blissful ignorance. And if you think you know everything I'm going to talk about, well, be blessed by grasping the knowledge even before I open my mouth. A little bit about my motivation. I have a son, and I wanted to build an application for creative games. At the same time, I was working on this talk about automated testing. The concept of the application is quite simple. You have a grid, you would draw a pattern on the grid, and the algorithm would fill it in with building blocks, essentially creating the building blocks task for your kid. Based on the size of the grid and selection of the blocks you have, which can be of a different size and color, the variety of patterns might get enormous, and algorithms, they get twisted. Wouldn't it be a great idea to somehow test the variety of patterns? Absolutely. What kind of test do I need? Do I even need end-to-end test here? Most likely no. Naturally, I would consider the function responsible for filling in the pattern with blocks, and I would cover it with unit test. Do I even need React.js here or any testing strategy? Absolutely not. But let's think bigger. Imagine this application grows, and now company owns it, and the time flies by, and we have 800 pipelines running at the moment in your mono repository. Now in the application, there's more than 200 pages and 400 teams on these pages. So complexity is enormous. And now I don't want to test just one function. I want to test the whole flow. And that's the moment where you really need an end-to-end test. So yeah. At this point of our story, the configuration is owned by one team. To the left, to the right, we have new content. There is merge. And as I want to test multiple scenarios in many browsers, I know that it will take a long time if I get more and more end-to-end testing to cover every potential scenario. How would I solve this problem now? The solution is isolated integration testing. An isolated integration test is a test performed by a test runner and a browser engine plugin on the page or selection of the pages of the application when application server is running on the same machine where your test is running. So consider this example. End-to-end test of a complex distributed system would guide the test runner through multiple servers where each server might be running on a different machine. In isolated integration test, every process you need for the application will be running on a single machine. I personally work only with Playwright, and even though this talk is not about Playwright, it's necessary to mention that this browser testing solution is indisputably superior to any other browser testing solutions. For isolated integration test, we do not need the deployment. For ongoing development, we don't need to have an instance of the backend running in a developer or any other environment. For new development, we don't need to have backend at all. We would simply code our application, install a bunch of dependencies, we would write a bunch of scripts, and boom, testing strategy is ready, and the code can be safely shipped or sent back to fixes. The step in development process where this test will be run is your merge or pull request pipeline, or you can run it locally to your liking. How do we make it? First of all, we do need to have an application to test. We would either build an application or have the application we coded before. We would need to install our browser testing software, and we would need to install a bunch of libraries to mock your backend if you need. So in my case, my backend is Apollo server. And for my case, I would navigate the test through the selection on the grid, where each selection is dynamically generated selection. It's some blocks selected on the grid. And the input would be user mouse and keyboard event. Output is rendered content on the page. So hear me out. I would spend 1.5 minutes to build application, run the server, and run the 100 dynamically generated tests, compared to 18 minutes I need to run an end-to-end test, where I would spend 15 minutes to deploy the application and 3 minutes just to find out that the instance of my backend was unstable in the environment where I was testing it. And instead of deployment, let's write the utility for starting the application. It becomes even easier if you would use web server configuration of a playwright, where you could specify all of the processes you would need to run before executing the test, and they will safely stop when your test set is finished. All right, about my backend Apollo server utility, it's literally starting Apollo server with the schema and with the configuration I give myself to this to the service, and it might bring some frustration, because if you're a developer who is not used to managing mocks, in this case it might be difficult. But to approach this problem, we could either generate schema when it changes and use it in your test, or run an introspection query to save a result and reuse it later and compile the schema programmatically. CI job is quite straightforward. We would install Playwright here because it's not a part of a production build, which is used in the rest of the pipeline. We would run our test. We would configure saving the report in the artifacts just to see what's going on in the case there was a mistake and the test was broken. Can we make it even more difficult? Absolutely. Consider having a micro-frontend architecture. A micro-frontend, it's a small part of the page which can be deployed in isolation and reused on different pages. At Booking.com, we continuously adopt micro-frontend architecture. Slowly but steadily we do this. So in isolated integration testing, you would have a choice. Instead of running just one instance of a server for your application, you could run as many instances of servers as you need for each of your micro-frontends, if you wish so. And depending on your infrastructure, you could configure host application to communicate to either real instances of the micro-frontends deployed somewhere on a different machine, or start a service on the machine where your test is running. That is the choice in the case of an isolated integration test. No deployments, no backend, no friction. It can be even better, because the same test set you've written for isolated integration testing, you could use it in end-to-end test job. Because in a nutshell, isolated integration test is just a test in browser. With a simple flip of the URL, you will run the same test set and be happy. What's next? Consider if your test strategy makes sense for you, and in the case you have scalability issues, you probably should consider having isolated integration test or change the distribution of the test types you have in your app. Like, every project is different, But in my experience, when it comes to testing, it's never a problem with your software or with any software you use for running the test. It's always infrastructure, it's complex applications, slow applications, and business need to constantly deliver new features. All of these factors, they make your end-to-end test set exhausted. And unit testing is never enough. It's never an answer for a good testing strategy. Testing always costs time, and time is money. Nobody got enough of it. Thank you very much. This is the end of my talk. And yeah, thank you. If you have any questions about testing or React, or why I have copyrights on my some of my images on the slides, please feel free to find me at the venue, and we could talk and have a good time. Bye.